Hello and welcome to the Deercast podcast with Tom and Harry. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Deercast. We are here on episode 11 of our podcast. Can't really believe that we're saying that. And today we are very kindly joined by Ben Heath, deer stalker, owner and proprietor of Deerbox, importer extraordinaire, all sorts of things that we'll cover. So Ben, thank you very much for joining us to start with.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Not at all. And we normally start these podcasts off by sort of just asking people to explain their background in deer stalking and how they sort of got into it.
No problems at all. Well, I've been a passionate sort of pursuer of country sports since I was about 4 or 5. I have a vivid memory of my parents had this. They lived near Reading in a village called Sonic, and they had this veranda outside of their cottage. And I always remember in the winter, because we had really cold winters back then, pheasants and rabbits and things hanging from there, and I was fascinated by it. And I remember on a Boxing Day morning, my dad going out shooting with his friends, and I managed to squeeze out the house without my mum seeing, and I ran up the road because it was literally up the road where they were going, and I had this vivid memory of them, 5 of them, walking down this track in the snow with all their backs, and of course my mum then came and grabbed me. And I was not happy that I wasn't allowed to go, and so I was desperate to get out. And my father then, when I was sort of 8 or so, took me beating. And I used to love doing that, and of course I was then desperate to shoot my first pheasant, which I did at about the age of 8 or 9 with a 12 bore. I didn't even mount the gun, I shot it from the hip.
Probably hurt a lot.
It was just, it did, and it was just one of those reaction things. But yeah, so, and there was always this inkling or this passion to sort of do everything. I wanted to become a gamekeeper when I was younger. That was my dream job. And I think I was 15, and I just wanted to try deer stalking. And one day I was looking in the Shooting Times, and there was this advert for a deer stalking course, a beginner's course, and it was down in Devon. And my mum said, I said, I really would like to do it. She said, well, go. And it was actually during term time at school. And my head teacher, my mum wrote a letter to say that I was going to take the Thursday and Friday off to go on this deer stalking course. And he said no, and if I was going to go, I'd be suspended. So my mum went round to his house that night and said he's going, tough. And I went, and it was great. It was basically like a DSC1 course, but it wasn't a DSC1. But it was with practical stalking morning and evening, and I didn't shoot anything, but I just got the bug for it. And I think about a year later, I shot my first deer. And I was hooked. I was really, really hooked. I wanted to do it. Yeah. Got my FAC, got a 243, and away we went. And I've been an amateur, or you say a recreational stalker for many a year. And I live in Berkshire, and getting ground is really difficult, really difficult. So I was fortunate to get hooked up with Mike Robinson on a recreational syndicate about 6 or 7 years ago, and basically the rest is history, or what we can talk about is then it's been a real sort of snowball in terms of the amount that I've done. I then started doing some professional guiding for another deer management company on the side. Started shooting loads of stuff, helping with firearms training, then helping with DSC1 courses, and it's been a real, learning curve. That's essentially where it all began from. Wow. from those little sort of acorns to oak trees grow.
And so, was your dad a deer stalker as well? Was he strictly a game shot, and you?
Purely a recreational game shot, rough shoots only. Never interested, never wanted to go, never did it. Yeah. Never wanted to touch it.
So your passion for deer stalking was just your own, and that's what drove you, and that's
Wow. It was. It was just there, and I wanted to do it, and I just find the whole thing fascinating, and it's different, isn't it? You know, you go out and, I mean, you can rough shoot and you can hunt pheasants and ducks and rabbits and all sorts, and it's you against, or not against nature, but in nature, trying to harvest that animal or that bird. But there's something about deer, you know, their level of intelligence, their and it's a bigger animal, isn't it? It's a much more serious taking. You know, you can. I remember shooting at pigeons and pheasants and not worrying if I hit them or not. Whereas with a deer, you want to make sure that it's the one shot does the job. And we've all, well, if you've shot enough deer, you will have had a situation where it doesn't go to plan.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time it happened, and I was just mortified. And luckily, we actually found the animal, and it was expired. It was dead. But just in that whole 3-hour period of waiting and then tracking and all of that sort of stuff, that feeling was just awful.
Yeah.
And so you take it much more seriously, and that effect it has on you. You know, I remember the first deer. I still remember the first deer I shot.
What was it?
It was a Rodo. It was
Without a test, Harry.
It was a beautiful February morning down in Hampshire. It was down near Alton, and I was out with this guy that did this course. I won't mention his name because apparently he was a bit of a rogue. And mind you, there's so many people in the deer world that are rogues, aren't there?
I've got to say, we're all rogues in
Yeah,
the deer
so
stalking
anyway,
world, really. So
there's some all sorts of stories I heard about him over the next few years. But I mean, I remember we stalked round this wood. It just got light, and there was this lovely valley with. It was almost like a horseshoe of woodland. It was really frosty, and suddenly seeing deer, and there must have been 40 to 50 roe deer in this field. I've never seen so many, and I've still never seen that many roe deer again. And of course they all scarpered suddenly because he had his dog with him that was howling and making noise, which really upset the apple cart. We stalked round, and he got onto a deer, and he actually shot one straight away. I was using his rifle, and then we spotted another doe about 20 minutes later feeding down the edge of this wood. And I basically stalked in with him to about 80 metres, or more, even closer than that. And then eventually we got so close we couldn't see the deer. It was behind a bit of an outcrop of the wood, and I had to crawl under this barbed wire fence on my own. And I crawled out into the field, literally on my stomach, rolled on my back, and then came up onto my knees and actually put the gun on my knee. Never done this before. The doe turned because she was backside towards me, and I popped the bullet through the neck. It was probably only 40 metres or so, but it was that whole instinct thing. And then, so I didn't get to feel the adrenaline, but afterwards, call the shakes.
Yeah.
It all kept in, and you know, it was
Buck fever.
yeah, it was. You don't that feeling that you get is quite special. And I took that animal home. I butchered it. I ate it. Did the whole thing, and that's really where it all started. You know, in terms of that want. And I then went to agricultural college, got a degree, did some pig farming, butchered pigs myself, did meat then. So actually, there's, you know, in terms of the story of where I am today, there is a little bit of a, you could say, well, there's obviously a link. You know, you wanted to be a butcher even when you were 18 because you were, you know, using a razor to take the hairs off the pig on your mum's dining room table.
I bet she thanked you for that.
Oh, she loved it. Yeah, she was well appreciative of that. Coming home from work and seeing me just cutting this pig up on a mahogany table.
So you got involved with Mike you were a paying syndicate member.
Yeah.
Then got involved with Mike sort of on a recreational basis, and then you're now sort of, well, are you in business? Or you're taking over the business?
So I mean, in terms of Mike's business has evolved. So when I joined, Mike had about 15,000 acres of land that he ran, and he had syndicates on it. And I, within 1 year, established myself as a bit of an effective. I'll say I'm an effective stalker. Mike needed to move out of the area where he was currently living because of work commitments and things. And so all of a sudden, we were suddenly about to take on a very big estate as well, so that it was about to, the whole operation was about to double. And at the time there was no real, there was some supply of carcasses into his own restaurants, and they would go via another game dealer. And Mike was passionate about actually setting up a sort of a full circle, you know. He doesn't like the word field to fork or field to plate, but that whole, you know, supply chain, you know, traceability, where everything comes from. You know, so many people say venison, and it's like, well, what is it? Is it roe, red, fallow? You know, they're all different. They all taste different. So let's be specific. So he had that desire, and this new estate was going to take on a full-time stalker, and so I then assumed the role of then managing his estates, which I then did, and I ran 2 syndicates for him, and I managed another estate of about 4,500 acres for myself, and I was still doing this other guiding as well for another deer management company, and then I set up my own guiding because I could guide on this ground as well, so I did quite a bit of guided stalking for myself with clients. And I would butcher my own deer at home for my own consumption, and you know, I'd give a bit to friends and that sort of thing. And then when COVID hit, the dynamic changed, and Mike Stalker wanted to go back to Scotland, and all of a sudden Mike's TV show Farming the Wild really took off, and then he got the contract for Fishing the Wild, and then also another one which was Wild Game Masterclass, which are all on Outdoor Channel. And so all of a sudden there was no way he could manage all of this, and with COVID and everything else, it was like, well, what are we going to do? We've got best part of nearly 30,000 acres of ground that we manage. We've got to shoot like 600 and 700 deer. We've never missed a cull figure ever. We've always got our cull figures.
This is bearing in mind you both do it part time.
Exactly, yeah.
And you didn't have a full time.
We did it on the big estate. Yeah, we had one there. So it was marginal, but all of a sudden, it stepped up a gear, and this is when COVID's happening, and that's when we formed Deerbox. So Mike is still involved in the business, but in a smaller level, and I've basically stepped forward and assumed the major role. Yeah. And since then we've taken on some more ground. We've got some ground with wild boar, and we're managing nearly 40,000 acres.
I don't know why we do these podcasts, because I always come away feeling really inadequate, because we meet people like you who we should mention, on top of all of what you've just mentioned, you have a full-time job as well. So there's guiding, there's Deerbox, there's recreational stalking, a full-time 9 to 5. I mean, it's not saying it just to flatter you, but I mean it's
cram it in. Why not? Or it's madness. That's the other way of looking at it. You know, insanity. But I mean, I don't do guided stalking anymore. That was what gave. That was the first thing to give, and that gave, before we started Deerbox. And I mean, Deerbox was formed because of essentially trying to find a market for all this venison that we were producing, and that's very apt at the moment. Lots of deer stalkers are looking at the infer price, as we were at the time, and thinking, well, we need to find a market. What are we going to do? How are we going to make it work, etc. And Mike always wanted to go down the route of being FSA approved rather than local authority, which adds lots of complications and paperwork and HACCPs and all the other bits and bobs for food safety. But that's what he wanted to do, and that's what we've done. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a passion that drives it. And I'm lucky in my other work that I can be flexible with when I do my work and how I do it. As long as I do it, it's not so much of a problem. And yeah, the Deerbox has been essentially, it is a passion that's turning into a business.
Yeah. So completely unrelated, but that very first deer you ever shot, was that with a 243? And is that what sparked your interest to carry on with a 243, or where?
Oh my goodness! So yeah, what did I shoot? What calibers have I got? Oh my, how many guns have I got? Don't you dare ask me that question.
Well, if it puts you at ease, I think on one of our very first podcast episodes, I recounted a story of a friend of mine who I went to pick him up one day. We were off down to Bisley, and his wife said to me, I said, "Oh, which guns are you bringing today?" And I won't name his name. And he said, "Oh, I'm bringing this one and that one." And his wife turned to me and said, "You won't believe how many guns he's got. He's got at least 6 gun cabinets, which means he has 6 guns." And I looked at him, and he literally was doing the sort of hand through the throat gesture, being like, "Don't," and shaking his head, being like, "Don't tell her." And he told me in the car afterwards, he was like, she thinks each cabinet only stores 1 gun, where in reality they store 4 each. So if that makes you feel any better, or have you got more?
What? No, I probably got a similar number. My wife once was looking at some guns that were out, and she said, "How many have you got?" And I just basically turned around and said, and I couldn't believe this came to me, but it worked. And I looked at her and I looked her straight in the eye, and I said, "Darling," I said, "let's put this into perspective." I said, "Guns for me, are like shoes and handbags to you." And she looked at me and went, "Oh, okay," and walked off.
Wow, you got away lightly.
You slide off.
What she doesn't know is the average value of a gun in relation to a handbag is probably slightly different. But anyway, it's that age-old thing, isn't it? When I die, let's make sure that we sort the values out properly, because otherwise I'm going to be in deep trouble. Mind you, it won't be because I'm dead. So, the first rifle I shot. So my Stalker's rifle that I used I remember it. It was a Heim 243 Stutzen.
Oh wow,
lovely! I got a Heim.
Unmoderated. Obviously in those days, because I'm older than I look. That was a few years ago. And then my first rifle was I wanted to have a Stutzen. I just thought they were epic. So I had a Ruger M77 Stutzen, lovely rifle, but I had a really manky scope on it that kept losing 0. So that really knocked my confidence. And so in the end I traded it in for a Seiko, and it was, what was the old one? Is it 295? It was before they had the 75s and everything.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A beautiful rifle. That was in 243, unmoderated. And that was my go-to rifle for many a year. And then I then ended up getting a Sauer 202 in 3006, which was that I then had for a while. And then when I kicked back off again, I moved over to the dark side.
Oh no.
Don't say 6.5 quid.
No, they weren't around then. Well, they were just coming out. So yeah, the 6. I will say 6.5 game. Well, no, I won't say that. So I had a Blaser R8 in 6.555 and 3006.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And unfortunately, I still am a very big proponent of the dark side, and I now have different calibers. But the 3006 is still in my armoury. But I've got too many basically, and I don't use half of them, but I've got them. So I keep saying I use that for this and that, and I barely take anything out. I generally use my 3006 for everything at the moment, especially with the lead-free, which we'll talk about at some stage.
Oh yes, of course.
But yeah, no, 243 is what started it off.
And have you got a kind of a fun gun, if you like, in your cabinet?
I do.
Oh.
I have a Blaser.
Of course you do.
K95.
Oh yes.
No. Tom's going to get very excited.
With a hexagonal barrel.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Grade 11 stock.
Yeah.
Exhibition walnut in 243.
Very nice.
Then you
Unmoderated.
Unmoderated. With open sights. Yeah. I've got a little scope on it.
Oh, amazing.
Weighs as light as a feather. Kicks like a mule.
Yeah.
Really?
Deafens you when it goes off.
Yeah.
But it can shoot literally it can shoot a 10 pence piece at 200 metres. It's so accurate, even though it kicks and it goes off and you think, oh, where's that gone? It just literally puts bullets through one hole.
Yeah.
It is so accurate.
Yeah.
And I use it literally for that quintessential roe deer hunt in the summer. It's just nice. It's just enjoyable, but it's I suppose what sort of I don't use it so much is because it's not moderated, and I don't want to cut the barrel. But it is that fun
You've gone up in my estimations even more, because I have it won't be as beautiful as your Blaser K95. I have a Merkel K3, which
lovely.
I don't know, I only got it this year and it has just transformed. I don't use it now because it hasn't got a sort of magazine capacity for drilling into fallow with, but I used it all through the summer on the roebuck and then in August on the prickets and bits and pieces, and it just, there's something about it. It's so light, small, portable, compact. All the listeners are stopping listening now because I've said this on every single podcast, but I love them.
I bought mine second hand because I could never afford one new. But I was very lucky. I managed to buy it for about $2,500 with scope, everything. It was. I was very lucky, and it's a lovely little gun which I look after and don't use very much. But I have shot 4 fallow out of a group with it.
Have you?
Yeah, so you can do it with it. But
we've had quite a few questions about the ethics of using a single shot rifle, or I suppose a single shot in general. What are your views on single shot rifle ethics of culling with them?
Well, I mean, in any shooting event, generally, what I would always say is, know your limitations. That's the first thing. Or try and shoot within your limitations. We always stretch it. With regards to, I've shot deer with and had a problem. If you shoot enough deer, you're going to have an accident. And what I've learned through guiding and shooting myself is that you can spot where you've shot the deer by the way that the deer reacts. And so generally speaking, I do think that in most instances where I've had a animal that's run off, I've not been in a position to take a second shot anyway.
Yeah, we were saying that.
It's either belted off or it's got up, and you can observe the 10-minute rule, and the head's on the ground, and you're looking for the ears twitching and everything, and it looks like lights out, and you get within 5 yards of it, and boof, up it gets, and charges off into the distance. You've got no chance of doing anything with that. If that situation happens. And I've had another situation where, gut shot from a client. And I had so much time that he got in a fluster to be able to take the rifle off him, load the gun, put it back on the sticks, and shoot it. Well, I could have easily have done that with a single shot. And it's all about practice and training, isn't it? I mean, if you're all fumbly and all over the place, then it's not going to happen. But I've watched somebody put their safety back on and not being able to lift their bolt up on their rifle because they got themselves in a fluster, and then they can't open the bolt. Well, you've got to take safety off, mate. Oh, okay. So at the end of the day, it comes down to practice and experience. But a lot of these things, again, are experience driven. You by making mistakes, you learn. And so ethics of a single shot when culling, well, you're going to cull less. But then equally, is it ethical to really, I'll say something quite contentious now probably, when harvesting fallow, culling fallow, if you've got the opportunity to shoot more than one out of a group, will you?
I personally would, if I had an opportunity.
Yeah, I know lots of people that would.
Confident doing it.
So, but equally, what's the chance of you shooting one, going, I've done that, that's down, it's running off, I know it's down, going on to the next one, are you sure it's down? Or if head and neck shooting, you shoot it, it drops, you go on to the next one. Are you watching that deer for 5 minutes?
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Are you staying on that deer just in case actually you haven't lights out and it's going to get up again? So at the end of the day, it's all about measured risk. And when you're trying to do a job as whether you're an amateur, professional, semi-professional stalker, I've got culls to hit. I've only got a limited amount of time. And therefore, I will take certain risks when culling deer, and there is the odd, very rare occasion that something doesn't go quite to plan, and it's then how you deal with that situation to, that then is building your experience bank, and whether you can effectively then take that risk in the future. So is a single shot ethical? I think so. It's all about using it within the means of your shooting abilities and what you do.
So what's that now? 3 podcast guests who've said yes and one who've said no.
You're winning.
I'm winning.
You've got the green light.
Excellent. Yeah.
But not
green
to
light.
put a moderator on it, which is still a splits opinion across the board.
Yeah, you'll probably ask me to leave now, Ben, but I have put a moderator on
I
mine.
think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I would go with that.
I mean, you use it more, which is...
I use it more.
Considering how much money you spent on it.
Yeah.
You see, that's the thing. I mean, I'm having another barrel made for my R8 in this is classic, in 6.5 by 55 Ackley.
Ooh.
What is that?
Well, you don't know an Ackley. So Ackley is where you basically have the chambers reamed out to make the shoulders at a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
Therefore pushes the case capacity up. So it's basically a 6.5-55 on steroids. So basically you're getting the same velocity as the 6.5-284, but you haven't used a fat case. So it's a really fast, flat, and I'll have it done in a 1 in 7.5 twist. So it makes it really good for stabilising heavier copper bullets, or more long range bullets. And I will have that threaded.
And that's your K95?
Yep.
Yeah. There you go.
I've never heard of that, Ackley.
Yeah.
So does that apply to any calibre?
So it's basically a guy that worked out. So I mean, cartridge. I mean, I could bore you senseless over cartridges because people get all. Let's have a calibre debate. Why don't we? Let's talk about something that there's no answer to. But yeah, so essentially what it is modifying, it's wildcatting a cartridge to essentially make it shoot more accurately by getting a more consistent burn within the case, and also by essentially getting more volume in the case, which means it goes faster.
Yeah.
That's it, essentially. So yeah, but yeah, I will have that moderated because I want to shoot my rifle more.
Yeah. When I now shoot, it won't be anywhere nearly as well behaved as Yortie, but with a very badly behaved Labrador. She comes with me, and part of me just feels guilty that if I'm going to be out with her all the time, both for my own hearing and hers, blasting off a rifle, unmoderated rifle all the time, I probably ought to stick something on the front that at least lessens that damage a little bit.
Exactly.
Good excuse.
Good excuse, gets me out of trouble. Yeah.
Speaking of calibres, we should do a professional segue because we are professional podcasters.
Of course.
Into our viewers, listeners' questions, I suppose you should say. And we've had one about the Nielson Sonic bullets, which Ben is you're the only importer for them, aren't you?
Yeah, I import those for Nielsen's into the UK.
And they're made
in Denmark.
In Denmark, okay. And our listener has asked, what makes the Nielson Sonics different from all the other monolithic options out there?
Okay, so Nielson Sonics are essentially, the Hunt bullet is a lead-free bullet. What makes them different is the design of the bullet in the way that Nielsen's wanted the bullet, how the bullet to work. So most monometal bullets, okay, are designed to work about what we call an opening of the bullet by water being forced into the cone or into the nose of the bullet, okay, and essentially creating this force that forces the bullet open, and most of them essentially mushroom. The Nielsen bullet is not made of copper, it's made of brass, so it's a slightly less dense metal, but the reason why they decided to use brass was they wanted the bullet to open and then fragment in a controlled manner, and copper is softer than brass, and so when they made their initial test batches, the petals, which are designed to open and then break off and then travel at about 30 degrees in the direction of the bullet, so essentially you get this cutting motion. When they were using copper, they were getting a lot more violent, just random breakages, and so they wanted to control the expansion of the bullet. One of the fundamental things about the Nielsen bullet is that most copper bullets, working on the expansion from this, it's not hydrostatic, but this water or opening from pressure, require velocity. And I'll digress slightly in as much as that I've been using lead-free for 6 years, and when I've seen all sorts of complaints and people talking about stuff, and you get the classic, which is the 308, which is not the fastest of calibers, and somebody's used to using 165 grain, so they go out and buy 165 grain copper and they run it at 2,550 feet per second, and then they go and shoot a deer at 250 metres, and then they tell, well, it just run off, the bullet's penciled. And that's because all of these bullets are designed to, their operation requires velocity. Okay? The Nielson is not designed around that. So you have a brass plunger in the front of the bullet which forces itself inside the bullet and shears the petals off. So the bullets will work at much lower velocities. They say down to around about 1100 feet per second impact. Whereas a normal Barnes GMX type bullet will require an impact velocity of a minimum of 1800, but for effective expansion they need 2200 feet per second. Okay, so the whole idea is that you can run bullets more consistently at the speeds you wish, etc., etc. The next thing that they did, because this guy's quite a bit of a mad scientist, is he made the bullets actually smaller than the diameter of the barrel. So if you take a 243 or a 264 bullet, they're actually made they're made 260 for example. And then what you then have is these what they call driving bands, which are rings, which then are on the shaft of the bullet. And they're actually made 3 or 4 thou over caliber. And the whole idea about that is that because they're so thin, they will deform to fit the barrel, and therefore they will seal the barrel, which gives you more consistent pressures. It also means you've got less contact of the bullet with the barrel, so you're not creating excessive pressure in the barrel, so you can use faster powders and run the bullet faster. Okay, so the whole idea is low pressure, high velocity, but they will work at low speeds, and a consistent opening, more like what you would get with a partition bullet. So you get this very, very easy expansion, petals break off, and then really, and then you've got the petals will cut, yeah, and create tissue damage and artery damage and that sort of thing. Also will dump some of the energy into the animal, and then you've got the core, the shaft, will then punch through to create an exit. And normally, because of the way that the bullets are designed on the amount of petal to shaft, the shaft starts to tumble.
Right.
So you actually get a little bit more of an exit. That's the whole idea about them. So it's giving people a more traditional lead-free offering. Yeah.
And do the petals exit?
Quite often they do. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they do. And so that's the difference of the Nielson bullet, and they're quite unique in that regard. There's not many. I mean, you've got the Evolution Green, which I used for years when I first started, which is, again, that's a fragmenting bullet, but you've got more of a powder that explodes with the jacket, and then you've got the core. And all the other bullets that you've tested as such as well, that the Nielsens are very different in their regard, and not everybody will like them, but we've got quite a few people that really enjoy using them, and they like the consistency, they like the way that they operate, they like that traditional, that lovely thump that you get when you report from the bullet that you've hit it, you've hit that deer. Whereas with some of the copper bullets, you don't often get a shot reaction. I mean, I've used Peregrines, I've used Barnes, I've used RWS, I've used I've used E-tips, I've used GMXs, I've used Lehigh Defence, I've used quite a lot, and they've all got their purpose. I don't think there's a bad one out there, to be honest. It's just understanding that if you're going to go down the route of the expanding or mushrooming type, you have to throw away all of that old science, heavy for caliber. Interestingly, you said about the 243, and quite a few people have actually emailed and saying, is my 243 dead? Is it obsolete? And my response is actually no, it's better. I've got a 243, and I've shot fallow with Accubons at nearly 300 metres and they don't exit. Yeah, and I've shot fallow at 300 metres with a 243 using I've used Nielsens, I've used Peregrines, I've used Barnes, and every single one of those bullets has exited, and none of those animals have run off. or they've not gone more than 30, 40 yards, you know. And I'm talking big fallow bucks as well, not just little ones. And in fact, I was stalking with I took a friend out for a fallow buck in the rut, actually, which is that head just there, and he shot that buck just off. We were coming into a rutting stand, and this buck was moving in onto a rutting stand, and he shot that 40 metres behind the shoulder, not in the shoulder, with a he was using 100 grain lead bullet, because that's what he was using, in a 243, and we found the bullet in the chest.
Really?
Wow.
40 metres away.
40 metres. Yeah, and so actually it just shows how good lead-free is in 243. The only limitation is obviously Scotland, because you've got the 100 grain law. But I have heard that they might change that at some stage, because they've realised that obviously, you know, the future is lead-free.
Yeah.
So, and we probably haven't actually asked you this yet, but how many deer are coming through Deerbox a year? How many do you think you're shooting a year with copper or lead-free bullets? Because I mean that adds quite a lot of weight to what you're saying.
So in terms of deer, you know, so we manage 40,000 acres. We bring best part of 900 animals in ourselves, 900 ish.
Wow.
So that's a mixture of wild boar, a few wild boar, about 60 wild boar. Then we've got about 500-600 fallow, maybe 500 fallow. 500-600 fallow. About a couple of hundred roe deer, 250 roe deer, and then about 150-200 muntjac. Yeah, so it's about 900 animals, nearly 1,000. And then we also buy in as well off neighbouring estates and other stalkers local to us. About another, so last year because we had less ground, we probably did 700 ourselves, and we bought about 800 in. This year we'll probably do 1,000 and 1,000. Wow. So we did about 1,600 last season, and we will hope to do 2,000 animals this season coming. That's our where we want to try and be if we can. But you don't know how it will go. At the end of the day, it's a bit of a blindfold, you know, in terms of what comes in, what we buy, what we shoot, what we sell, etc., etc. And all of those deer this year, all of them will be lead free. And last year, I would say 95% were.
And controversial question, which I know a listener will probably ask us, is they might all be lead free, but are they all headshot?
No.
No.
No, they're not.
No. So no.
I mean, at the end of the day, so I will personally, if I can, head and neck shoot when it's right. But there are situations where a body shot is necessary. And we've got syndicate members, and again, we would encourage them where safe and where ethical and within their means that they take clean shots. But equally, they're out to enjoy themselves, or they're out to experience stalking and you know, take part. And therefore, you know, you can't start dictating that. You know, there is obviously a huge argument over best practice, and you know, when we all do our DSCs, you get taught that you need to body shoot, you need to do this, you need to do that. But then there's the actual the processing costs, and the reality is, you know, people will say, "Oh, there's no damage with that. I shot it behind the shoulders." You know, when you've skinned a deer off, it's a completely different kettle of fish what damage you might have, and you know, stalkers will say, "Well, why are you only paying me? You know, why are you docking me 50p a kilo on a carcass for a body shot?" The reality is, there's meat that you don't use. So on an average fallow deer that weighs 30 odd kilos, we're probably throwing away 3 to 4 kilos of meat. So there's 10% on that. But it's also then the time in trimming. It's the cost of disposing of that meat. Yeah, because we have to pay to get rid of it. And okay, it's not stupid money. You're talking probably about £80-90 a tonne, but it's still
money.
Got to get rid of it. You've got to pay for it. You've got to keep documents. Got to keep all the records. And there's all the time and the butchers and the mess, and it's, you know, there's just a lot to do. Yeah. So it's a lot more work. And if we're selling whole saddles, for example, you can't sell a body shot saddle. The restaurants don't want it, so you have to trim the loins out and use it for something else, and so but no, I would never ever turn around and advocate for somebody and say no, they're all and for us, 80% probably are clean shot, 20% are body shots.
Yeah, and so you just going back to copper. You obviously sell quite a lot of it through Deerbox, but quite a lot of it through restaurants.
Yeah.
Is there a demand for non-lead coming from the restaurant trade, or because from our perspective we often see that it's the game dealers who are saying we want everything non-lead. Where's the source of that? Do you think is that coming from the consumer in the supermarkets, or is that the restaurants?
So so supermarkets is one side, but bear in mind this, okay? Supermarkets will not and do not take wild deer. Period. Okay? There is lots of plans, and we're all trying to encourage the supermarkets to do it, but Sainsbury's, Waitrose, those and Marks and Spencers, they will only take park and farmed deer, and they all have to go through a abattoir processor in the UK, or they are farm deer from abroad. Okay, I believe that Tesco's, because they get a lot of their venison from Highland Game, I believe that they are slightly more open towards wild, but again, generally speaking, they do not. They want farmed, and it's all down to HACCP. It's all down to critical control limits and proof of where that animal's been. Because the problem is that a deer that's gone into the game dealer, you don't know where it's been. There's no way of proving that you stored it at the right temperature. There's no way of proving that your vehicle didn't have a petrol can in the back. There was no way of proving any of this, and so therefore they don't want to know. And so unless us as a deer stalking fraternity wish to embark in an enormous amount of assurance, which, considering that most of us kick back at a lot of things, I don't think that will happen. But so supermarkets want lead-free, but they're not the driving factor. The driving factor really, and as a consumer at the restaurants, I'll probably get burnt down for this. Most chefs don't care. I've never been asked by a chef, have you used lead-free ammunition on these deer? I tell them we use lead-free, and they go, oh wow, and then they ask me what the weather's doing or something else. They don't ask a further question about it. All they're interested in is provenance and quality and that sort of thing. And they should be interested, but they're not really aware of that. They're not. I don't think it's been drummed into them. We do get quite a few public, so retail customers emailing in and asking, where they've been a bit more educated. It's interesting, isn't it? We say, is it the game dealers that have been pushing this? The fact is that the venison market has been really tough for game dealers. And we as stalkers, bearing in mind that although I'm now a game dealer, so I'm now in the game stealer bracket, I am still a deer stalker, so I can see it from both sides now. And pre-COVID, I would say probably 75 to 80% of the venison, wild venison or wild deer that were harvested in this country were actually exported. Okay? And the remainder of that, 20%, 25%, was consumed primarily by restaurants. Yeah? And processing. So, the home market as such was very small. And what caused the crash of venison price? Because that's it's interesting for me anyway. It might not be for anybody listening, but the fact is that I shoot a lot in Germany as well. I go over and help some people. I've got some forestry ranger friends, and so I go over on sort of not government run, but they're government estates or managed woodlands, and so we do quite a bit of driven and also culling over there. It's just good fun. I enjoy going, and they like me helping. And in the last sort of 5 to 6 years, that the German government and many of the Europeans are being driven by green agendas, more trees, more of this, more of that, and less deer, less wild animals. So essentially they waged war on the forests. And as a result, they've been shooting or harvesting considerably more animals. And as a result of that, there's been less demand for imported product. So that was what started to cause the drop in prices. It wasn't the game dealers screwing anybody. It wasn't, it was purely by the fact that game dealers all of a sudden were freezing down tons and tons of venison because the market was they were saying, we don't want it, we don't need it, or we'll pay less. And then you threw COVID into the mix. Yeah, and that was basically the sort of the nail in the coffin. So as a response to that, we've got to build a market in the UK. And we've got to build trust. We've got to build trust with the consumer. Now, we know that it's not a debate. It's a scientific fact that there is no known safe limit for lead. We've been told to remove it from pipes. We have copper pipes now. We don't have lead pipes. It's been removed from paint. It's been removed from petrol, and all of the REACH policies and everything else that are driving forward want to remove it from manufacturing in every form possible. And so it's not just removing lead from our sakes of shooting an animal, it's removing it from somebody using it in a factory. Yeah? And actually making something out of it. And so they don't want it, they just don't want it, period. And that's what's driving it. That's what's there, is knowing that this has got to change and saying, look, let's get ahead of this. Now, from a food safety perspective, why do we put a copper jacket on a bullet? Do you know? Because lead is so soft, when it's travelling at 3,000 feet per second, it deforms. Yeah. It's not a liquid, but it literally starts to become way more malleable and soft. And the bullet gets hot. Have you ever shot a thermal scope?
Yeah.
So if you shoot the target, the actual bullet where it hits, it's hot.
Yeah.
And it stays hot because the bullet's hot from the friction of the barrel and then going through the air. So when that bullet hits that animal, a lot of the lead, or some of the lead, actually dissipates almost into a particle form, and it travels quite a distance. They say between 35 and 40 centimetres from the shot point. So you've got up to 80 centimetres of contamination, and you can't see it.
Yeah.
It's not a shotgun pellet that's dangerous, or a big fragment of lead. You could ingest that, it'll go straight through you. But the really small stuff, that's the stuff that's not good for you. And for people like you and me, I'm in my 40s, it's not going to really do that much to me. But it's pregnant women, young children, and what they're saying is that, people talk about lead poisoning and having blue gums and that sort of thing. Well, we're not talking about that. What we're talking about is the fact that people could be eating it and you could be getting high risk of cancer, high risk of other illnesses. With children, it's growth development, brain function, pregnant women, the effect that has on a baby. Yeah? These are the important things. So it's all very well stalkers going around and saying, oh, well, it never hurt me and all that sort of stuff. But the fact is, if we want to put this into the food chain, we need to be responsible. And that's what's driving it.
Absolutely. And when we did a test that's will be coming out on YouTube at some point, which compared a lot of copper bullets and we did a lead bullet as a test, and we shot it into ballistics jelly, and the amount of material in it was really surprising, actually, to both of us.
Quite shocking.
In terms of, like you say, the small particulates, and it just looked sort of dirty almost, and there's like a sort of cloud. So I totally believe.
And just to finish up on this, because there's other questions, but the fact is that if you want to shoot a deer with a lead bullet and eat it yourself, that's fine. But if we're going to put this into the food chain and feed other people, we shouldn't be putting restrictions or saying don't eat this if. So that's really where this drive is coming from.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you sort of touched on two of the other questions. So we've got 5 in here, which we might not have time to do all 5, but you touched on 2 of the other questions, which one of them was, in your experience, what's the hunting culture like overseas compared to the UK? So you just mentioned you do a bit of hunting in Germany. So Germany and the other countries you've been in.
Yeah,
I
haven't hunted. I've hunted a lot in Germany. I've hunted in Switzerland, and I did a little paid trip to Kyrgyzstan recently, which was amazing. Do you know what? We're all the same.
Okay.
Every place I go, hunters, real hunters, are all the same. We think the same. We act the same. We love our food. We love people. Yeah. Culture, I'd say there's a lot of respect in Germany, very old school. They don't like head shooting, which I find really funny. I always break the rules over there. And also the acceptance. We think that in this country people are very anti-hunting, and I've got a lot of American clients who are friends now. It's the same the world over. Germany have got massive problems at the moment with them now actually their sentient policy. So now my friend went and fished for pike the other day, and they had to kill every pike because they weren't allowed to put them back. Because the rules are now, if you catch it, you kill it, you don't put it back. There's no catch and release because it's a sentient being.
In England?
No, this is in Germany.
Okay.
But this is so we think about culture and hunting culture and perception of hunting culture, and we potentially think that the UK's we're in this awful, we're being hammered by the public for and we've seen this sentient beings bill going through Parliament as well. It's no different over there. And actually, when I look at the way that the friendships that get formed, the experiences. Obviously, every place that you go is different in terms of the way that they hunt. Like in Kyrgyzstan, when we went after an ibex, and they were horrified when they heard that I shoot, female animals. They were like, "Why? Only shoot the big old males?" But they don't live in a country where we've got no apex predators. Where we were going up there, into 4,500 meters above sea level with no oxygen, quite was an experience. We were finding argali heads and carcasses that had been consumed by snow leopard and wolves. Yeah, and they were telling me that a snow leopard will kill upwards of 100 ibex a year, really? And a wolf will kill tons. I mean, they literally kill loads. I can't remember what the figure was, but it was shocking, and you suddenly realise, well, actually, so you wouldn't kill your females or any fawns, followers, whatever you want to call them, because the end of the day, that's your breeding stock. That's so the only way is conservation management is essentially trophy hunting, whereas in this country we don't have apex predators, and so there's that cultural difference, and so. Yeah, they were quite shocked by that. In Germany, they're very formal, and they do things their certain ways. But the general people, no, I reckon we're all the same.
So, next question, which I think I know the answer to already, is one calibre for the rest of your life, what would you have?
Yeah, it would be 3006.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, so I've been 243, then I went to 6.5 because I thought that's the calibre. Yeah,
By 55?
It doesn't matter. They all shoot this. I mean, 6.5 PRC, okay, it's slightly more gas behind it. 6.5 284, that's great, but, less magazine capacity because it's a fatter bullet. 6.5 55 is great, but it's the same as a Creedmoor. It's just different case. I moved over to 3006 about I've always had 3006, and I started using it with the copper because I wanted a slightly bigger diameter bullet, and I found that with the velocity of a 3006 I could get a 130 grain doing about 3.2, 3.3. And I just found that for general deer stalking it worked really well, and actually with using things like Barnes, Nielsens, you don't get lots of carcass damage. Actually, you get no more. In fact, I get less using a 3006 than I do with a 6.5 because you punch a bigger hole out. So, I don't get that horrible blood mess on a body shot.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about 3006 is you can run them light, 110 grain copper, 130 grain copper. If I go to Germany, I use 150s or 165s. And I could go to Africa and use 150, 165s on anything up to Eland. So as somebody I knew would say, from muntjac to cows with a 3006. That's pretty much what it does. But you know what? I've done a lot of load development for people. I've helped a lot of people reload. I've loaded in, 243, 6XC, 2506, 257 Roberts, 270 I've done, 708, 308, 3006, 458 lot, 375, and I'm sure I've done a few other things as well. And the fact is, they all work. They all work. And so realistically, if anybody was saying out there, I'm starting out today, what should I buy? I'm going to stay in the UK. I'm going to be using lead-free. I'd probably actually say 308.
Blimey, Tom will be happy.
Oh, this is turning out to be the best podcast ever.
Because
Kit Blouse and 308s. Oh.
Yeah, you can run 110. You can run 110s, 130s.
Yeah.
And that's ideal for everything that we shoot over here. And then if you want to go abroad, you could. But equally, 3006, I reckon, it's a better calibre. It's a more old school calibre.
Ben, come on. We've just become friends.
But it's a connoisseur's calibre, so not everybody's ready for 3006. But either those are all great. And to be fair, any of the others, it depends. It also depends on if you reload. It depends on if you, or buying factory. There are so many variables that come into it, and also what gun you really want. Because if some manufacturers don't make the caliber. Creedmoor's great. If you're a girl or don't have a recoil sensitive, it's fine. They're all good.
Yeah. Amazing. We should probably brush over a couple of these, but there's one question that I think is quite good, which was written in. Where do you see the future of the venison industry?
Ooh. I'm very positive about the venison industry. Mind you, I should be. We're well seated in it now, aren't we, as a processor? So we're really trying to focus on encouraging customers and also restaurants, and I'm part of what Mike's been doing with Country Food Trust. I'm an ambassador for them. And really encouraging restaurants and consumers to make venison an everyday food. Not elevating on a pedestal. It's not going to be ever a cheap meat because it's expensive to process. And, when we were chatting earlier, I said to you that it's not subsidised. Beef, lamb, pork, all of those foods are subsidised. And they're also, slaughtered, processed in a factory environment where, it's much cheaper and much easier to do everything.
Yeah.
Mechanical skinning, all of those sorts of things, much easier. Whereas game or deer, it's a lot more complicated. It takes more time, so it's costly business. Game dealers are not game stealers. It's just if people actually realised the cost in running this business, they would be quite scared. But the future, I think, is really encouraging or really exciting because we're starting with nothing. So I've already touched on earlier, the venison market in this country is non-existent, really. And so we're seeing this massive increase. And the other thing is that you've got a much bigger increase in people being conscious of where meat comes from, factory farming. You see butchers talking about all this pasture-fed beef. Well, how much pasture did it really have? There are questions about labelling and things, and so and customers aren't stupid. They know this. They suddenly, how did all this grass-fed beef come suddenly so available? And we've actually got some vegans that have to eat meat. They've been told by, for dietary reasons that for their blood group that they have to eat meat, and they have chosen that wild venison is acceptable for them. And I've even got some vegetarians that now only eat venison or a vegetarian-based diet. So that encourages me. From an ethics basis, we've got not only a leg to stand on, we've got, both legs and support. We know that deer management in this country, deer need to be controlled, deer need to be managed. We've got too many deer. Everybody's talking about too many deer. And the press are now talking about it. And the press are telling the public, it's good to eat venison. It's healthy. It's got, we can go through all the health benefits, but it's higher in vitamin minerals. It's not low in cholesterol. It's actually quite high in cholesterol, but it's not bad for you. And it's also very low in fat. The fats it has got are great. It's a better meat to eat than chicken and turkey. So we've got all of that positivity, and we've got the ethical side of things. So I think that the future for venison is brilliant, providing we encourage people and we get rid of this myth that venison is gamey, it's tough, it needs to be cooked in stews, and we encourage people to use it in everyday cooking, substituting beef, lamb, pork, that sort of thing.
And we should say Ben very kindly showed us around his incredible facility and some amazing products, including venison bacon, which I've read about but never actually seen in the flesh. And
I'll give you a packet to take away, and then you can all have
bribery.
a packet.
Look
there
at that.
you go.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Sorry, Harry. So that probably segues us on to the next segment. So you'll be pleased to hear, Ben, penultimate segment of this podcast, and then you can go home. Is if you had, and we've started asking some of our podcast guests this, if you had to have one venison dish for the rest of your life, what would it be? And that can be both the cut, but also how you would cook, present, and serve it.
That was so much easier answering the calibre question. Oh my goodness, I don't know. I mean, our family is like literally Bubba Gump venison. It's like venison stew, venison bolognese. We've even made venison carbonara with the bacon offcuts.
Wow.
Because we make venison bacon.
Yeah. Of course.
What's my favourite? I've got a couple of favourites. Loin is obviously really favourite for everybody.
Yeah.
An 8-bone French trim rack, I think, is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But I am going to have to put that with something else because, I can actually, because it is one dish. So my other favourite cut is the top side, from the haunch, which we call the rump, but it's not really a rump because the rump's the chump cut. But a whole top side, reverse sear, what we call it, either sous vide up to about 45-50 degrees, or put in an oven at about 140 for about 25 to 40 minutes depending on the size of the top side, and then whacked in a pan with some butter, rosemary, bit of garlic, olive oil, basted, let to rest, and then sliced. I'd do the same with the French cut rack, and I'd serve 2 or 3 slices of that top side with a nice chop from the 8-bone rack. And then you could put that with a pepper sauce, green pepper sauce, absolutely banging. Either mash, whatever, but I don't know.
Which deer would that be? Just to add just an even more complicated.
Right, this is that's like asking a calibre question. That is. So everybody will tell you that Sika deer is the best.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I do like Sika, but my favourite is fallow. I love fallow deer.
Yeah.
I just love the fact it's just such a mild flavour.
Yeah.
My kids love roe deer.
Sweeter.
It's richer, isn't it? But I think it's also the fine texture because it is more tender. It's a smaller animal, and they like muntjac as well. I mean, it's such a difficult question. But is that my favourite dish? Probably it would be. But I mean, it's such a versatile meat. It really, really is, and we've got some amazing game chefs out there now, and the amount of exposure that's happening, in the Eat Game Awards. I think it's all really, really positive. Yeah. And so if we can encourage more and more people to eat it, then great. But I think actually that would be, Okay. 8-bone rack with the top side.
Oh, that doesn't make you hungry then. I don't know what does. My God, sounds amazing. And then just as the final question in the podcast, we do a segment called Bobby's Bits, which we have already explained to Ben, but for the benefit of any listeners who are new to the podcast, this is, I do slightly regret calling it this now.
Yeah.
It does sound slightly dodgy, but it was my, essentially, it came about because my little brother, younger brother, very into his deer stalking, was on his gap year, earning lots of money, living at home, you know, bank of mum and dad sort of thing, had lots of money to spend. So we'd go out every week and he'd buy a new bit of kit, he'd have a new scope one week, new pair of gloves, Spyflex sticks, you know, I'm there renting and all the rest of it, trying to scrape together every last penny and sort of hoping and praying for the next bit of kit that I wanted. So the question really is, what is your next piece of kit that's on your horizon, if you've got one that you really...
I haven't got... Okay, so I am very much the person that fits into the bracket of all the gear and no idea. Yeah. So I've pretty much... I haven't got anything on the horizon because I've got pretty much...
You've got it all.
I think I've got it all. I probably haven't, but... So if so I'll give you some bits that I think have revolutionised stalking.
Yeah, perfect.
And also cooking as well, from a cook's perspective.
Ooh,
interesting.
Yes,
Okay.
I'd like to know this.
So from a stalking perspective, I think the most valuable piece of stalking equipment that any stalker can have is Viperflex sticks. Or quad sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that really has revolutionised a stalker's abilities to shoot. The number of people that come out with me or have or do, and they bring out an old bog pod or another set of sticks, and they got a bipod on the front of their gun.
Yeah.
And I turn around and say, right, you know, we go out stalking. Their effectiveness to harvest an animal ethically and at distances that they can comfortably shoot are massively reduced without the aid of quad sticks.
Yeah.
And people can say, yeah, well, I practice, and that's fine, you practice. But I can guarantee that I can, even as a novice, I can get a novice shooting at way longer ranges with quad sticks, with only a little bit of practice, than I can without. And how many times are you lying down and all of a sudden the brow's in the way, or you've now not got a backstop, or there's grass in the way, or you know, you're lying down in the water or whatever, and actually it takes time to do all of that. So I think quad sticks are revolutionary. Thermals and those sorts of things, of course they've been game changers, but they don't actually, you know, I think from being an effective stalker, I think that's one of the biggest pieces.
And do you use the fifth leg on them?
I do, and I put it in the wrong place as well. I put it at the back.
You and Mike both do the same.
Yeah, I saw that.
I know, and actually I was up having a bit of a laugh with Andrew Venables once. We did a day for some people, and he chucked it on and I put it on the back, and he was like, "What are you doing that for?" And I then said, "Right, come on, you have a go with this." And you can get a much more you get much faster second shot back, and you can quickly adjust if the animals are moving around better. So that's why I put it on the back.
Okay.
And I can be quite lazy as well, and then just let the rifle sit there as well. That's why I put it on the back, but I also can put it on the front. I'm not, you know.
Yeah.
But the fifth leg, I have to say, is again another step level that takes you to another level.
Yeah.
And I would even take quad sticks even to Scotland and stuff, because at the end of the day, it puts you in a position. You wouldn't always use them, but there are situations where actually it works really, really well. And I think it's a great thing. Is there anything else from a stalking perspective? No, I mean, I've got an ember leaf knife, I've got, you know, Zeiss optics, all those sorts of things, and they're all fantastic, but actually none of them change what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'll throw in something as well from a carcass recovery perspective. The number of people that think they present a clean carcass, but they don't. And nothing beats a suspended gralloch. And so there are lots of products out there in terms of hoists and other things. You know, I've got a Donington deer management cradle on the front of my quad bike, which when I'm out culling on my own is actually game changing. You know, I don't break my back. I can do a beautiful gralloch on an animal, really clean off the ground.
Yeah.
And actually, another one for those that aren't into that level of seriousness, I'll give a little shout out for Napier, because they do that truck click one, which goes off the tow bar for trucks.
Yeah.
And they do the one for the hatchback, which goes off the door.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Now, I don't have the hatchback one because I've got a pickup truck, but I do actually have one of those. And it is limited, you know, it won't cope with a 70 kilo fallow buck. It will, but it's literally bending like a fishing rod. And the little ratchety thing struggles, but it still gets it up off the ground. Yeah.
So that's a for hatchback cars.
Yeah.
Well, that's not for hatchback. So I've got the one that goes on the tow bar. So I've got the truck click one, which is and it sits in a bag about 4 foot, so 120 centimeters by literally 8 centimeters high and 20 centimeters across. Yeah. It takes me less than a minute and a half to deploy it. You know, so take it out of the bag, get its legs out, extend it, put it on the tow bar, get it all up, and it takes me no more than 2 minutes to put it away.
But you were saying they also do one if you haven't got a tow bar hitch on.
And it goes on your hatchback, it goes up from you open the hatchback and it clicks into the little ring that your door clicks onto. It goes up to and it holds the hatchback open, then it has a hook coming off it, and you've got this, essentially a ratchet thing that lifts it up. It's brilliant. You know what? It's Napier, and one's called a truck click, and then it's an auto click or something like that. But you know what? They're a bit cheap and cheerful. But for somebody that wants to pop something in the back of their car, and actually perform a larder quality gralloch, they are on the money. I have to say, a useful little bit of kit for not, you know, don't have to spend all this silly money on. And I have to say, for the record, I think range-finding rifle scopes are a waste of time and money. I'll put that on there. There's only one manufacturer that makes them, and I think they're absolute tosh. Anyway.
There you go.
And then finally, Bobby's bits for cooking.
Yeah.
Traeger grill.
A lot of people seem to have those at the moment, don't they?
I have to say that has been life-changing.
I think Mike's got some in his restaurant, hasn't he?
He has, and actually, it was him that put me onto one. So he did a podcast. He did an episode for Farming in the Wild, and I was on it with him. And we took this Traeger out, and it was called a Ranger. It was only a dinky one, and he ran it off a battery pack. You know, off just a small 500 watt, whatever it was, little rechargeable thing, and it's a pellet grill. But I'll tell you what, it cooks venison like nothing else. Really? It is sensational, and so I use that for my Christmas turkey. I use it for everything. I've even got two now. I've got a big one and a little one, but the little one still, which is like 600 quid, it's not cheap. I still use that the most. I absolutely love it. So for somebody wanting an easy barbecue, and it's not a barbecue, it's a smoker and it's a grill, but it produces amazing quality food. It's all controlled by temperature, and it burns wood pellets, and you can change the flavour, but ultimately it's just amazing steaks, amazing burgers, amazing food. It just, you know, if you've got a spare 600 quid and you fancy something to impress, that is on the money.
There you go, Bobby. Something to aim for.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for coming on and for keeping us entertained. I've lost track of time. I didn't even know how long we've been recording for.
An hour and 13 minutes.
So there you go.
Not too bad.
But it has been amazing, and the listeners won't be able to see this, but we're actually in Deerbox HQ at the moment. We've had an amazing tour around first, and to see the kind of state of the art facilities you guys have got here, it's I can't say enough. But thank you very much, Ben, and thank you all for tuning in and listening. We'll hopefully catch you on the next one.
Thank you very much.